Hi, welcome to Rules Challenge. My name is Carter Maxwell, and in this episode we're going to be taking a look at the game Hegemony. I have to admit that I'm a bit apprehensive about this video because I'm not at peak rules freshness. Most of my plays of the game were at least about 9 months ago. And also the rule book has more of a narrative style that's hard to reference just to double check some of my points during the video. But back when I was playing the game more, I did take a lot of notes. I think I've found quite a few things that people tend to forget or misunderstand. If you're new to the show, this is basically just a test of your understanding of the rules, but instead of just asking you questions from the rule book, it'll be like you're watching a real game being played, but I break it up into sections, and then at the end of each section you watch, you'll be asked legal or illegal, and your job is to figure out if what was done during that turn was correct. As always with my videos, the game is already well underway. They've played through a full round. They're into the second round, and everybody's had at least one turn. The working class just finished, so we'll pick up the action with the middle class. All right, the middle class is going to start things off by playing the personal consumption card. That card has a couple of options, and he's going to take the first one: buy a good or service from any number of sources up to your population from each. He'll check his current population level, and that's at 4. And he wants to buy health, so he'll start out buying from the state, and the state currently has it priced at 5, so he'll buy 4 of those, and he'll pay 20 credits or Vardis to the treasury. And the state will gain 1 victory point for that. Then he'll buy 4 health from the capitalist, who has them priced to sell at 5 Vardis each. So he'll take 4 and pay 20 Vardis for that to the capitalist's revenue. He'll put those 8 health he just bought into his goods and services box. And then for the third transaction, he's going to buy from himself. He could buy up to 4, but he wants to save some for a sale later. So he's just going to buy 3 and not pay anything for that. All right, that completes that card action, so he'll discard that. And now he wants to take a free action and use healthcare. Again, his population's at 4, so he'll spend 4 of those. He'll gain 1 prosperity, moving to 2. Since his new prosperity value is 2, he'll gain 2 points for that. 1, 2, 2. And then he'll gain 2 more for just the regular use healthcare action. 1, 2. He'll gain 1 unskilled worker and add it to the unemployed workers box. And he'll adjust his population from 14 to 15. Everything was done legally that turn. A couple things I want to mention. It was correct that the middle class player did not pay anything for the health that they transferred from their storage to their goods and services. To transfer the goods from storage to goods and services, they do have to take a buy goods and services action, but they don't actually have to spend any money or have the money available. Also, note that the health that they bought from other factions went directly into their goods and services box. Storage is just for the goods that the middle class produces themselves. And last, I want to point out something about the cards. The card played this turn was very specific. It said you buy a good or service from any number of sources up to your population from each. But sometimes the cards are much more general. Like this one says, you may then buy goods and services, without telling you how many you can buy. When a card references one of the basic actions, the regular rules for that basic action apply. So even though this one doesn't state a limitation on how many can be bought, we know that the regular buy goods and services action is limited to your current population, so that limit applies if you're using a card like this. All right, now the capitalists are up. They'll play the card Higher Education Program. They're going to use the action on the card. It says sell up to 9 education to the state for 10 Vardis each. then the state will gain 1 legitimacy for every 3 education sold. And they want to sell the full 9, so they'll take 5, 3, and 1 more. They'll put those 9 education into the public services box. You'll notice that the state doesn't currently have an education company, so their current storage max is 6, so they'll take these 3 excess and remove them to supply. Those 9 education were being sold at 10 Vardis each, so they'll take back 90 Vardis, and they'll put that in their revenue. The card said that the state gains 1 legitimacy in capitalist for every 3 education it purchased. It purchased 9, so they'll move up 3. 1, 2, 3. That wraps up the action of the card, so they'll discard that. Now for a free action, they want to pay off a loan. In the first round, they got a little short of money and ended up having to take a couple loans. So they're going to pay off one of these, which will they'll pay $50 for that. They'll pay 11 from their capital. And now they don't have any capital left, so they'll pay the remaining 39 from their revenue. So they'll pay 40 and get back 1. They'll move that money to the supply, discard a loan card, and that finishes their turn. They sold too much education to the state. The card said they could sell 9, so they sold 9, but you can't sell the state more items than it can store. Now the capitalist player did notice that not all those 9 could be stored, but instead of discarding those 3 excess, they shouldn't have sold those extra 3 in the first place. And by the way, this would be a good time to clarify something about state storage that I got wrong the first time I played. A state company doesn't have to be operational for it to count toward the state's storage capacity. So for example, sometimes people might look at this situation with the media and say, okay, well that company's not operational, so the state's storage is only 6. But you do get to count this company towards storage capacity. So the state's storage capacity for media right now is actually the base of 6 plus 4 from this company for a total of 10. Now it's the state's turn, and they want to take a basic action, so they just need to discard a card. So they'll discard nationalization. They want to propose a bill, and they want to try to change fiscal policy, which is currently on C, so they'll put their bill marker on B. They want to call for an immediate vote, so they'll spend one of their personal influence cubes. Now they need to carry out an election, and the state player will start things out by placing their vote marker, and they'll place that on a yes. The working class will vote yes. The middle class votes yes. And the capitalists vote no. We'll draw 5 voting cubes from the bag and sort them. We have 3 blue and 2 red. Red voted yes and blue voted no. Players now announce how much influence they have. State player has 1, working class 0, middle class 1, and capitalist 0. So there's no way to increase the no votes, but there is possibility to increase the yes votes. Players now secretly bid influence. Working class and the capitalists won't even bother since everyone knows they have 0. Middle class and state will bid. And the state bids 1. That means it's now 3-3 and the bill passes. We'll move the policy marker from C to B and return the bill marker to the state. The state proposed that bill, so they'll gain 3 victory points, moving from 6 to 9. And the working class contributed cubes, and so they'll gain 1 point, moving from 9 to 10. We'll discard the cubes from these 3 yes votes. We'll return these 3 losing votes to the bag. Now we need to resolve the change to fiscal policy, and the state will choose 4 companies to open. So they'll do 2 new health companies and 2 new education companies. Those 4 companies cost 20, 40, 60, 80 Vardis. So the state will pay that from the Treasury. Now the state will assign workers to those companies. There aren't any yellow workers available, but there are a couple white skilled workers. So they'll move this white middle-class worker and gray middle-class worker here, and this white working-class worker and gray working-class worker to this one. And they've placed all 4 of those in the committed orientation. Now the state needs to set wages. The labor market's currently at B, so they'll place a cube at the middle level of each company. Everything was done correctly this turn, but there are 3 things I want to highlight. Someone proposes a bill and holds an immediate vote. You don't add new cubes to the bag. You're carrying out an election, which is just a particular step from the elections phase. So you skip over the steps from the election phase that have you adding new cubes and having the state gain an influence cube. Second, when fiscal policy changes from C to B, it doesn't mean open 3 new companies, which is how it often registers with people. It means that 6 public sector companies should now be open. We had a situation here where the capitalist had purchased a company from the state, leaving the state with only 2 open companies. So when the fiscal policy shifted, 4 new companies had to be opened to reach the necessary 6. So that was done correctly. And the third thing is, it wasn't relevant to this example, but I just want to make the suggestion that you make sure that everyone at the table understands how fiscal policy and loans taken out by the state relate to each other. IMF intervention can be a catastrophic event in the game, and it will catch players by surprise if they don't understand that the one shown on the C policy doesn't mean that the state can have one loan during the production phase. It means that if they have one loan, then the IMF intervenes. It's a super easy and common misunderstanding. So spend extra time to make sure people understand how that works. Okay, I said I had 3 things I want to highlight, but I actually thought of some more. In a 2 to 3 player game, when the fiscal policy changes and you need to open up more public buildings or more public companies, you simply start opening them up on the next row. But in a 4-player game like we have here, the state gets to choose. So it was okay that they decided to go exclusively with health and education and ignore the media companies. And remember to make sure that the state pays for these companies when they're flipped. They aren't being flipped over for free. And that can make the change in fiscal policy kind of a double-edged sword. The state can now have more loans, but it's also far more likely to need them because they're going to have increased labor costs. Now it's the working class's turn, and they just want to take a basic action, so they need to discard a card. They're going to take an assign workers action. So they're going to take an unskilled worker from the unemployed box and place it in this working class slot here on the convenience store. And they'll also place one here in the doctor's office. And with their last assignment, they want to put a worker in a trade union. They're going to check if they're eligible in the health industry. They have 1 committed worker here, 2 here for a total of 3. They have 3 uncommitted here for a total of 6, and 2 committed here for a total of 8. So they're going to take this white, skilled, uncommitted worker, move them into the trade union. And the university hospital is now not fully staffed, so they're going to take these 2 and put them in the unemployment box. And that completes their turn. I want to mention something that might seem super basic, but I've seen people get confused about it a couple of times, and maybe that just means I'm bad at teaching the game. But you don't have to have 4 skilled workers in a particular industry to be able to place one of them into a trade union. In other words, like the working class had a white skilled worker here, a white skilled worker here, and one here, for a total of 3 white skilled workers. And I've seen people think that they had to have 4 of them on the board before they could put one into a trade union. But no, you just have to have a total of 4 working class workers, skilled or unskilled, working in that industry to be able to move the skilled worker into a trade union. And always remember, like we saw here, that if you pull a worker out of a company and so that it's not completely filled, those remaining workers go to the unemployment box and that company is no longer operational. Now the exception to that would be some of these middle class companies where you could remove a working class worker and the company could remain operational because they're not essential to the operation of this type of company. We're back around to the middle class, and they want to take a basic action, build a company, so they just need to discard a card. And the company they want to build is the private school. That company costs 20 Vardis, and they only have 16 in their income, so they're coming up short. So they're going to take a loan card, and they'll take 50 Vardis from that, and then they'll pay the 20 Vardis. They'll move the private school to the board and place a wage marker on it. And now they want to assign workers to it. It can take a yellow middle class worker and a yellow working class worker. They're going to take this uncommitted yellow middle class worker from the capitalist company and place it committed in the private school. And they'll take this uncommitted yellow working class worker from the capitalist college and put it committed in the private school. These 2 capitalist companies are no longer fully staffed, so these 3 workers will go to the unemployed box. The middle class player made 2 mistakes this turn, so hopefully you caught both of them. First, they voluntarily took a loan, which you can't do. Recall that they were building a company but came up short of funds, so they took a loan to pay for the remainder. But building a company is a voluntary act, which means taking a loan to pay for that company is also a voluntary act, which is illegal. The second thing they did wrong was taking that yellow skilled working class worker from the college. This mistake would be fairly easy to overlook because the middle class does have some ability to take workers from other players' companies. Like we also saw in that turn, they took a yellow skilled middle class worker from the technical university, and that was legal. But there are a couple important considerations. One is that the workers have to be uncommitted, which was fine in both of these cases. They were all uncommitted. But they also have to be middle class workers. So the ones in the technical university were eligible to be taken, but the ones in the college that were working class were not. When the middle class builds a company and they want to assign working class workers, they have to come from the unemployed workers box. Now the capitalists are up and they also want to build a company, which is a basic action, so they just need to discard a card. And they'll build the publishing house, which costs 12 Vardis, so they'll pay that. And they'll move the card onto the board. And they'll place a wage cube on 25. And now they want to assign workers to it. This one calls for 3 unskilled middle class or working class workers. Looking at the unemployed workers box, looks like they have enough workers of either type available. So they'll take these 3 middle class workers and they'll place them into the publishing house committed. The fact that the capitalists put a skilled worker in this unskilled slot tends to look illegal to people in this situation. Now here's how the unemployment box looked at the start of the capitalist turn. I think it's widely understood that when there aren't enough unskilled workers for unskilled slots, then you can use skilled workers instead. But people will see that the working class had plenty of unskilled workers to fill those slots and think that those should have been used instead. However, for a company that can take working class or middle class workers, you aren't forced to choose one or the other simply because they have enough of the appropriate type of worker. You choose which class of worker you want to use, then if that class has enough unskilled workers for unskilled slots, you have to use those. In this case, the capitalist first chose which class he wanted to use, which was middle class. Then he assigned workers from the available pool there. Since there weren't enough unskilled middle class workers, he was then able to use the skilled one. Now it's the state player's turn. They want to do an event action, so they'll need to discard a card. They want to do the event unfair representation. That says provide 1 personal influence and 2 voting cubes to a class. And they're going to provide that to the working class. At the moment, they don't happen to have any influence cubes on their player board, but there are some influence here in the public services storage, so they'll take one from there and place it in the state benefits box for the working class. Then they'll also add 2 working class voting cubes to the benefits box. Per the event card, the state will gain 1 legitimacy in working class, so they'll move from 1 to 2. They'll discard the event card, and that ends their turn. I found this example fairly tricky. If you focus mainly on the section of the rulebook that discusses providing resources to other players, you may get the impression that the state can freely take the influence cubes from public services storage when they don't have what they need available in their own player board influence box. Or if you thought something was amiss this turn, you might assume the problem was that the state did not pay 10 vardas for these cubes. The issue, though, is that the influence cubes in the public services box aren't personal influence. They're media influence, which is something different. For media influence to become personal influence for the state, they have to convert it using the campaign action. And that in itself is a main action, so it would have had to have been done in a prior turn. Now my copy of the game, I think, is a first edition, so it's got a fairly old version of the rule book. But at the time I'm recording this, which is December 2025, I did find a version 1.2 of the rulebook online, and that happens to include a specific example of this event card. And that version of the rulebook does a better job with card clarifications, so I recommend you make sure you have a version that you're working from that is up to date. All right, now the working class is up, and they're going to play the card General Strike. That card says, perform a strike. You may place an additional strike token for each trade union you have. And then it requires that the labor market be at either 2B or 2C. We see the working class has 1 trade union, so they'll be able to place 1 additional strike token. And we'll verify the labor market is at 2B or 2C, and it's at 2B, so that's fine. So the working class can place 3 strike markers. They'll place 1 on the clinic, 1 on the supermarket, and in the public sector, they'll place 1 on the public hospital. They'll discard the general strike card, and that ends their turn. That was a pretty simple turn and a pretty simple mistake. A strike token can't be placed on a company with a committed worker. And the workers here in the public hospital were committed, as were the workers in the clinic here. They should have all been uncommitted like the workers here in the supermarket. And another thing I want to mention about strike tokens, sometimes The other factions will increase the wages in a company that's under a strike, and they'll immediately remove the strike token. Remember, though, that the strike token isn't removed until the production phase. Now it's the middle class's turn, and they want to do an extra shift, so they just need to discard a card. They'll choose the training center for the extra shift. They'll commit both workers there, and that'll produce 4 education. And they'll place those 4 education in their extra storage area. Now they want to do a free action and use education. They'll check their population level. That's currently at 5. They'll spend 5 education. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll gain 1 prosperity, moving from 2 to 3. They'll gain 3 points, moving from 19 to 22. Now they'll upgrade an unskilled worker to skilled. They'd like to do one that's in the unemployed workers area, but they don't have any workers there. So they'll upgrade this one here from gray to purple. And that ends their turn. The problem this turn was that the middle class used education that was in their storage area rather than in their goods and services area. When they're taking one of those free use actions, use education, use healthcare, use luxury, the goods they use have to be in their goods and services box. And the way to get them in there is with the buy goods and services action, like we saw them do in question number 1. Note that it was okay, the somewhat unusual way they upgraded a worker. It's fine that it was an employed worker. It doesn't have to be one that's in the unemployed box. And here it happened to be an uncommitted worker, but it could also be a committed one. The capitalists are up again, and for their main action, they're going to play the card Exit Strategy. And that card says, sell one of your companies without a machinery token for twice its cost. They'll choose to sell the clinic here with its ungrateful striking workers. It does not have a machinery token on it. We'll get rid of this wage marker and the strike token. And we'll return these 2 workers to the unemployed workers box. That company originally cost 16 Vardis, so they'll get 32 Vardis back for that sale. They'll put that into their revenue. They'll discard that company card. Also, they notice that the working class now only has 3 workers in the health industry. 1, 2, 3. So the working class will move this worker out of the trade union and into the unemployed box. They'll discard Exit Strategy, and that ends their turn. The problem this turn was with the company the capitalists sold. Here again we see an issue with committed versus uncommitted workers. The workers there were committed, so that company could not be sold out from under them. Notice that the presence of the strike token was not an issue. You can certainly sell a company that is under a strike at the time. I should also point out that it was correct that the working class had to move their trade union worker to the unemployed box. Having 4 workers in the health industry wasn't just a condition for placing the worker there. It's a condition that has to be maintained to keep the worker there. Once they had fewer than 4 workers in the healthcare industry, that worker had to come out of the trade union. Now the state's up, and they're going to play the card Healthcare Program. Before we get into what the card does, it does have a requirement that healthcare and benefits be at 4A or 4B, so we'll verify that. And we're at 4B, so that's good. That card says, provide health to a class equal to its population, get a legitimacy token for that class. So that can be given to the middle class or working class. They'll give it to the working class, and their population is currently 5. So they'll need to provide 5 health. They have 2 available in their own public services storage, so they'll take 2 from there. The other 3 they'll purchase from the capitalists, who have them priced to sell at 5 Vardis each. So they'll pay 15 Vardis from the state treasury to the capitalist's revenue and take the 3 health. They'll place those 5 health in the state benefits box for the working class. And the influence cube and 2 voting cubes already there, they'll remove and return to supply. The state will gain a working class legitimacy token. They'll immediately gain 1 on the legitimacy track. They'll discard their played card, and that ends their turn. This turn we had another version of the state providing resources, but this time done correctly. If the state doesn't have enough of the resource they are providing, like in this case where they came up 3 short, they can purchase it from whatever source or sources they need as part of that action. An important point here, notice that the state discarded the influence cube and voting cubes that were already in the state benefits box. That's something the other factions need to be alert to. If they wait to take the receive benefits free action, those benefits could disappear. Also note that the state gained 1 legitimacy at the time they gained that token. Not only do these give you a legitimacy during the scoring phase, they also give legitimacy at the time they're obtained. Now the working class are up, and for their main action they want to buy goods and services, so they'll need to just discard a card for that. They'll check their population. They're currently at 5. They want to buy luxury, and the capitalists currently have that priced at 8. They'll buy 5 of those for 40 Vardis. They'll pay that into the capitalist revenue, take back 5 luxury, and put that into their goods and services. They want to buy 3 more, and their source for that will be the foreign market. The price is 6 Vardis each. Tariffs are at level 2, so they'll pay another 3 Vardis each. So that'll be 3 luxury at 9 Vardis each. They'll pay 27 Vardis for that. They'll pay that to the supply or bank or whatever you want to call it. They'll take 3 luxury from the supply and put it in their goods and services box. Their main action is done, so now they want to take a free action and receive benefits. So they'll take these 5 health from their state benefits box and they'll put it in their goods and services. The state will take a victory point for that, moving from 9 to 10. And that ends the working class's turn. Before I get into what was done wrong that turn, I should mention something that people often ask about. The tariffs are per item, not per transaction. So it was correct that the working class paid a total of 9 in tariffs rather than just 3 for that purchase. The mistake the working class player made was that they paid all 27 Vardis for this transaction to the bank. The tariffs are supposed to be paid to the state treasury. So it should have been 18 Vardis to the bank, 9 Vardis to the state treasury. And that's a mistake that the state player has to be alert to all the time, because that's an easy and common mistake to make. Now we're back around to the middle class player, and they're going to play the card Export Subsidy. That card requires that fiscal policy be on 1A or 1B, and we saw it move to 1B just a few turns ago. And the card says, sell to the foreign market. For every transaction you make, gain 5 Vardis from the state. And then the state will gain 1 middle class legitimacy for this. Looking at the current export card, there's 2 sales they want to make. One is 3 health for 25 Vardis, and the other is 8 education for 45 Vardis. They'll take 3 health from their storage and 8 education. They'll gain 25 for the health and 45 for the education for a total of 70, and they'll put that in their income. The card said they'll get 5 Vardis from the state for every transaction, They did 2 transactions, so they'll get 10 Vardis. They'll put that in their income. And then, because they're the middle class and did 2 foreign market transactions, they'll gain 2 points. And we'll mark that, moving them from 22 to 24. And then, per the card, the state gains a 1 middle class legitimacy. We'll discard the card, and that ends their turn. Everything was done correctly that turn. A couple of things that might be worth mentioning. It was right that the middle class got 2 victory points for selling to the foreign market. They get 1 point per transaction, and they completed 2 this turn. But remember that you can't repeat the same transaction. For example, let's say the middle class player had an additional 3 health. They couldn't have done this transaction a second time. And you might think, well, wait a second, the middle class had a lot of extra health available. But remember, when they sell to the foreign market, the goods must come from their storage, not from their goods and services box. For the final turn of the challenge, the capitalists want to make a business deal for their main action, so they'll need to discard a card. There's only one deal available right now, and that is to obtain 12 luxury for 50 Vardis, so they'll pay 50 Vardis to the bank. They don't want to have to pay any tariffs, so they're going to put all of these in the free trade zone. They'll take 12 luxury from supply, and the free trade zone tile shows that they can store up to 12 on here, and that's exactly what they just got. So they'll put those all on the tile. And to wrap up the main action, they'll discard this business deal card. Now they want to do a free action, and they want to give a bonus, and they'll give it to the working class. So they'll take 5 Vardis from their revenue and put that in the working class's income. Then they'll commit these 2 working class workers in the supermarket and remove that strike token. And that ends their turn. All right, we're back to talking about strike tokens. And the capitalist mistake was in removing the strike token from the supermarket. Giving a bonus and committing the workers there does not make a strike go away. It would have prevented a strike, but once the strike token is there, giving a bonus doesn't affect it. And a quick note about the business deals. It was correct not to reveal a new business deal card after the existing one was discarded. New business deal cards are not drawn till the preparation phase of the next round. All right, that looks like a good place to wrap up the challenge. I hope you got something out of the video. As I mentioned earlier, please be sure to make a comment if you think I've got anything wrong, and also comment if you just happen to have a question or need a clarification. Again, this has been Rules Challenge. I'm Carter Maxwell, and I hope to see you again soon.